It's 7 PM, and it's September 5th, 2018. I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. We have 3 variance hearings and 1 variance request, but 3 scheduled events. And then I'd like to announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting, and then we can vote to amend the agenda. So there's 1 listed here, and I'd like to maybe add a second. So we have ZBA petitions for hearings on 9/11/18. And the other one I'd like to add is just the West Nile virus information that went out today.
That is down under other business.
Oh, fantastic.
So I figured
Yeah,
that could be included there.
Oh,
But
well,
I can give you an update on the flu clinic for this year, which I
right.
just had the confirmation of the date.
Okay, so then the 2 items we have are the ZBA petitions and the flu clinic. Anything else anyone has? Okay, and do we have a motion to add these 2 items to the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Let's see. I'm guessing you're here for the Horsley Mounding Study update?
I am.
Okay. So does anyone have any issues if we just take that first? So. Is that okay with everybody? Great.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we had received the written report from Scott Horsley, and he had also made a presentation at one of the board's meetings in May. And there were some things that he talked about in his presentation that were not in the report, so I drew up a list of things that I recalled that I just thought it'd be nice to capture in the report if he could. He said he's amenable, and it's in our stack tonight. And then if anyone else has any other ideas, and I thought of one more thing to add to the list I had. So, let me find that. Okay. The one other I would add is that I believe he made some comments about the sewer gravel that gets used for mounds as specified by Mass DEP and their kind of absorptive capacity or something about how that material might treat contaminants in the effluent. I don't know. I seem to recall he talked about different soil types.
Right, I thought it was more in terms of permeability, but I could be misremembering. I don't know about, because gravel isn't very absorptive, so.
Right.
um,
Okay. I could maybe ask if he has any comments about that
Right,
he
we
recalls.
did talk about
making.
that there's variability in the types of soil, and didn't he say that there is maybe something better than what's currently being recommended, or that there was, so I do recollect that.
That's
yeah.
kind of why I wanted it in the written report.
Okay,
So,
'cause I don't recollect exactly what he said either.
so any other things besides what, I guess for everyone, I'll read what I had written down. He had talked about the dynamics of water moving through overburden versus through bedrock fractures, basically. The thing that stands up in my mind was a huge difference in the speed with which groundwater travels in fractures, much faster than the overburden. He talked about how things act, the interface between the overburden and bedrock. And in his PowerPoint presentation, he had information about the slope that might be around mounds or what happens when mounds are on slopes. And let's see, talked about the, if general concept was, if you're putting a mound in an area because there's shallow bedrock or some other limiting conditions, but if that stretches over a good deal of the property or the area, that he would view that differently than a mound in an area with more soil in general in the vicinity. Depth to groundwater versus depth to bedrock was somewhat part of that. And then I just said anything else he might have remembered in the meantime. That
I think one thing he mentioned that I think had come up in some of the other discussions was the mounding of the groundwater in the context of mounded systems. And so the sort of density of systems in an area where he had made some kind of recommendations about thinking about kind of the number of systems in a given amount of space being a potential risk factor because they act cumulatively in that mounding of groundwater effect. And so I think if there's any mitigating factors around kind of large lot sizes on one end of the spectrum versus any kind of cautionary factors in higher density, if there's any kind of guidance around that, it could be helpful as we think about applying this to projects.
okay.
And then I got a chance to rewatch some of his presentation, but I didn't get all the way through in the context of bubbles. So, you know, the kind of question of the layer cake design, I think we sort of have talked about with the soils. My recollection from that was that it was going through the that there wasn't a piece from Scott that we were waiting on, but there was the evaluation by the state in the context of the IA stuff. Am I remembering that right?
Yes.
Okay.
He suggested that they go through that process and see if it works out and whether the DEP generally accepts the concept of amending
Which
their
would change that sort of
specifications,
the
right.
clean granular fill versus something like that with more organic media on the belief that that may provide better decontamination.
Right, and also because he thought that we may not be permitted to just add on, you know, say, yes, build it the state way and then also add this other layer. So the process they're going through with the Barnstable group, he thought might flesh that process out. So,
And I guess my recollection is that he was more hopeful about that type of sort of organic amended system as performing better than conventional mounding. If that's something that he's able to weigh in on with available data, that would certainly be helpful to sort of think about.
anything else we should relay to Scott?
I'd have to,
Are you particularly specifically related to mounting?
Yes.
There's another issue, which is not related to mounting, but is related to Scott.
No.
And the,
But
no,
that's
no,
not the topic.
I'm just pointing out that another time, I would like to have an opportunity to share that with the board.
Okay.
It's not related to this
Later tonight, we were
conversation.
talking about agenda items. Let's
Okay.
add that.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I just ask
Yeah.
about?
Oh, yes.
At the one that was, that I watched and I wasn't present for, there was an indication by the board that once the report was received, there was an intention to post it
Right.
to the Board of Health's website. So is the thing that you now have received the thing that's going to be posted, or is that still one more iteration of that?
I think after these questions would
The
then be the
latter.
final work product, that would be what is posted.
Okay, and when do you reasonably anticipate that would be? Because it obviously, this probably took longer than we thought from the May presentation until getting the report, about 4 months later. So I was wondering whether or not you have a sense for whether this will be turned around quicker, relatively quicker?
I don't know. We need to ask him what his schedule is. He didn't indicate any issues with a major delay, but I do believe he teaches in the fall, so.
And I guess, I don't, I presume to know, but is the document that you're not yet ready to post, that's still a public record that we would be able to access if we chose to?
I think that was the material that was included in the May 16th presentation. So I think it's been disclosed,
Yeah.
right?
I think the PowerPoint, I think, has everything, but it sounded like there's a new document that you just got. Maybe-
No.
No.
I mean, at least I haven't.
It's a draft report. I mean, it's basically a summary that reflects pretty much in a text format what he discussed in the PowerPoint. So there's not necessarily, right? Isn't that?
But have we got, I don't remember getting something since May. I think that we got it in support of that meeting, which was on the same content that he then talked about.
Right.
But I don't think we've got a subsequent report since then. Right.
When Daryl held up something, I thought, oh, something.
Oh, that's her,
No, no,
that's her
no,
notes
yeah.
for, this
No,
is,
these are my notes.
No,
Yeah.
there's something else you put behind it.
No,
No,
you're
no,
right.
no.
I said, oh, good, there's something coming. And I guess my last question is that there was some suggestion, I think, in what Mr. Horsley was presenting, that a lot of the information would or could help boards develop some regulations themselves, and I wonder whether or not that had been something that is in the board's site.
Well, the contract with him was originally set up to be two phases. First one, research, find out if there's even anything out there that we could piggyback on and use. And then the second part would be, if there was, then try to craft a regulation or guidelines or something new. But since it's not, there's not a lot, but there is some information and there's stuff being worked on now that we could benefit from, but it's still in process. So the kinds of things we were looking to, that goes back to what is the Mass DEP process for being able to take their specifications to something and go another step to make it more effective in terms of treating effluent. And his opinion is that we'll learn a lot from whatever they're able to accomplish with what they're doing at the Barnstable Research Alternatives Research Center. So, as I mentioned, he just didn't think that we could make that kind of change, even if we say, do everything you have there, but then add a piece. He didn't think the DEP was going to accept that, since they are requiring that the layer cake design go through, and that's an add-on, go through further evaluation by Mass DEP. So he's agreed that he would come back and help us for the next phase when the time comes for that.
I think to your question is sort of, is the door closed on considering this? Or, I mean, my take is not that it's
No.
closed. I think it's the question of, here's the final report. I think for me, the things I worry about is just the performance of sterile sand to sterilize seems limited. And so for me personally, not speaking on behalf of the board, I'm certainly more hopeful about the layer cake design, providing something that more closely approximates and treats the effluent safely. But again, if we're not allowed to use that technology by the state, it gets trickier to say a kind of precise piece without knowing what the state timeline is. But I would say from my own standpoint, what I'm trying to get to is something that feels like it performs as well as our baseline systems, and to be able to say that with a reasonable degree of confidence. And if we can arrive at a structure that looks like that, that would certainly be something I would be comfortable supporting, but would want to have some reasonable degree of confidence given the sort of permanent nature of the systems we're putting in.
And I think also, because the testing of all these systems is still in its incipient stages, when we were trying to come at, like, well, are there certain conditions where things it might be more favorable to contemplate permitting it versus it's not going to work under these conditions, like we were saying, like maybe if there's shallow ledge, that could be sort of a deal breaker for certain types of alternative systems, things like that. Until there's more test data, he didn't feel comfortable saying, you know, these are the ideal conditions for this kind of thing, and I know that's something that we had discussed with you initially, like, are there sort of criteria that could be mitigating factors that would make people more comfortable that the success was going to be long-term? And it just didn't seem like he had a lot of technical information yet to clarify what are the kind of going to be the key variables that would make a system like this just as effective. So, I don't know, does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the longevity of the layer was another issue that, you know, it's a new thing, so how long is that really going to last? So that's something that I know is on their radar. How they're testing that, I don't know.
I just want to know how close the blips
How close the,
are. Blips of the radar. Is it far away or is it close? So I think you have to respond to my question. I appreciate it.
okay, so, all right, so do we, I got your two issues. We got these, the one I added with some wording modification just about soil types. and
Right.
Kind of
Clarification,
effectiveness.
yeah. Materials.
So do we have a motion to send a message to him to include these items to the extent possible for his report?
So moved for that, and I think it certainly would be helpful to give them some guidance on expected turnaround time,
Timeline.
just so that we can kind of relay that.
Yeah.
It seems like these are within scope for the work he's done,
Yeah.
and so hopefully it will be able to be done in a timely fashion, but certainly it'd be nice to see in the next 1 to 2 months.
Years.
Yeah. I mean, I would think that
This seems
these
like a quick turnaround
modifications
project,
should
but-
not take very long. I don't think it would be unreasonable for us to say, you know, we really need this from you within 4 weeks so that
Yeah.
we can provide it to the public.
Even if he says the data isn't available, at least we have an answer.
Right.
No,
So,
and I don't-
You know, just,
It's for dissemination and distribution. I mean,
Right.
that's why, you know, we need to share it.
Yeah, I didn't envision any of these as things that he needs to write a lot about. We may have to dig into the
Right.
details at some point in the future, but just to capture this,
Current
so that
thinking.
we don't lose track of
Right.
these points that were raised that are all important, and that was, to me, the
Current
bigger goal,
thinking.
so we had it all in
Yeah.
one spot.
yeah, current thinking and standards is helpful, more helpful than nothing.
Yes. Okay, so 4-week turnaround time would be the amendment to
Request,
that?
yeah.
Okay. Anything else for the motion? All right. Anyone like to move that motion?
Second?
Okay, I'll move it in a second.
Oh, I thought he moved it.
I thought I
did
moved
you?
it,
Oh,
but
you
then we
did
amended
move
it.
Yes, yes,
But then we
yes,
amended
yeah,
it.
okay.
We have a good movement.
Okay.
Okay, we're really good at.
All right. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Like everybody.
Thank you, and thank you for being here.
Absolutely, you have a
No
good night now.
problem.
Okay. I guess we could do the Fields at Sherborne deed restriction on bedroom count. I did not bring my old one. Did you get a new one? No.
Bring what?
This is the same one you were given
Yeah,
for the last
previously.
meeting.
I knew I meant to
This is
put that
the
for a reason.
original that you would need to sign.
Okay. So basically, we've been asked by town council to sign a document pertaining to the Fields at Sherborne, and it's grant of Title V bedroom count deed restrictions. So we were ordered by the court to accept that they would limit the number of bedrooms by setting up deed restrictions, which the board was not inclined to do, but it sounds on advice of counsel that we don't have a lot of choice in this, but we did want to bring this to a meeting just because it was an issue that was important to a lot of people in town. And so we wanted to make sure it was on a posted meeting, because we did receive it, I believe, the afternoon or something before the last meeting, and decided not to take it as something not anticipated 48 hours in advance. So, questions, anyone, on that? Anything anyone wants to say about this?
I just want it to be,
I'm still unclear, why do we have to approve the deed restriction? Why is that the board's?
Because bedroom count is a big issue for the board in terms of septic system sizing.
Right.
And by the board's count of the rooms in the fields at Sherborne Development, we come up with more bedrooms than the current septic design can support. So the court is basically saying that we have to accept that they're restricting the number of bedrooms in the units is suitable as a
Are
way
you
to
saying
control
because
it.
No,
it's
no,
being
I-
monitored as a public water supply?
No, I understand all that. What I'm saying is, why do we have to sign it? It's not our property, and they're doing aren't they doing a
think it's
public
us. I
water
think
system?
it's
So
us.
so where's our sort of regulatory purview to sign
So
this?
I think it's, I don't know, I wish I were a lawyer, once again, because I think it falls into the sort of vague.
Gray zone or
Because it's private well system, even though it's in that transient, semi-public
Well, this has to
category
do
that's
with the
regulated by
septic
DEP, maybe it's
system, though.
because of that. that-
Oh, because
This is
then it's
septic
under-
system
So we-
Under Board of
related.
Health, I'm just saying, because bedroom count and septic is
Yeah.
under Board of Health, I think that's why,
So-
even though it's in that.
So it just
transient-
says we're approving and
We
accepting
accept
that
this.
that this deed restriction will mandate and be enforceable to meet the room count requirements.
Right.
Period, okay.
It's a lot like when we sign the plans, right? They've made a presentation.
That's what I was going to
of-
say. It's an analogous, okay.
This is,
So
for this
what if
amount of
we-
flow for this number of bedrooms in this house at this location, kind of thing. So, and
With the
the
restriction.
page that we signed.
If
that
the restriction
has-
were
Do we all
enforced.
sign
Well,
it?
it has to be.
No, just you.
Right,
Oh,
we're saying
fantastic.
the
Just me.
speculation is, this is the number.
I asked that question.
If within these circumstances, we would authorize it.
Right, I just, like,
So
oh,
it just
it's only
says
you.
approved and accepted by Board of Health, so that's,
sounds,
Okay,
yep.
we don't have to do anything else. And
do it with flourish.
again, town council said,
You know
please.
what would be
so-
really helpful with regard to something like this? If the town council ever has to come to us for another reason, could we ask him to comment on this sort of question? Because it would be I'm just interested to hear, to be educated about why we're, that sort of question. It's a legal question, and it would be useful information. Do we ever have that ability to get his perspective on
I believe it's a
things?
her.
Yeah.
Okay,
But.
sorry, I don't know.
I think it's a,
Ellen spoke with her about
Yeah,
this
about
and before, when we first
doesn't
got
sound
it
like the
from them,
guidance
where they
was on
said,
the
sign
fence."
this is ready to
Yeah.
go, and
like, it seems like the guidance from town, so I think the broader question of a kind of general legal parameter seems like a question that we could put to town council, but would then need to get approved for this particular instance that's kind of matter tonight.
Yeah, no,
That
not
one
for-
sounds
not
like
at
it's
all
pretty
for tonight or
definitive
this.
of,
Yeah.
you should sign this.
Yeah,
And we just want to make sure that we
Yeah.
signed it with
Yeah.
public notice.
Yeah.
So do we need to give you a motion to sign?
uh-huh.
So is that a motion to accept the deed restriction on bedroom count as provided here tonight?
and approve herewith.
Or is it just to authorize Daryl to sign?
Oh, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, what's
Yeah.
been
What
presented.
town
I like
council
that.
has.
Sure.
So authorize.
Did
I
you
like that
sign?
better.
How about so moved?
Authorize Daryl to sign what town council has suggested.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I know,
All
see,
right.
that's the thing, is that
It's a lot of work.
if we didn't
Today
think
is,
that it was really safe, what
Well,
would
I think
happen if we said
We don't
no?
have
I
a choice.
think
No,
we've got a
I'm
court
just
order, so
curious.
it's not really one of the options.
That ship sailed because they're abiding by,
Right.
with that deed restriction, I guess the room counted,
Yeah.
That we think is, that we recommend.
or that's in our regulations.
What can we do in 3 minutes?
I can give you an update on the ledge thing. That'll only take 3 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. I can give an update on what I've been doing. That
Okay.
will only take
All
3
right,
minutes.
let's try that.
Longer discussion will take longer. So I was able to do a telephone interview with a professor at University of Connecticut, his name I can't remember, and that was fruitful. He forwarded me a wealth of documents, PowerPoint, all kinds of other things, and even more important, names and titles, but not phone numbers, of officials at the the relevant department at the state level in Connecticut that oversees these regulations. The gist of what I learned from him is that he's been very involved in manganese contamination study. He's not doing it anymore. He put that aside quite a while ago. And the problem stemmed from blasting. Blasting seems to be the big source of this. I asked him about hammering, which is what I believe is being done here. I don't know if blasting is being done in Sherburne, but he didn't have much information on that. Separately, I went back and forth with the fellow at the Department of whatever it is in New Hampshire. No,
DES.
Brandon, his name will come to me. Anyway, we were supposed to meet yesterday, but that got rescheduled. He had to go in the field. And he did send me hundreds of pages, because I made a broad request, hundreds of pages of documents related to all kinds of groundwater contamination issues caused by blasting or hammering, but again, mostly blasting. They have a big problem up there because of, it seems mostly to be highway construction. Millions of pounds of ANFO used every year, many millions, to get rid of many tens of millions of granite, that granite state. So they've looked at this a lot. I'm still going to go up there and see him. We just have trouble finding a day that will work. I've started to dig through his big pile, have not finished yet, but there's a lot there.
Actually, it's interesting because one of the hotspot towns around Boston is Boxborough, and it's because it's going through, the 495 went through a lot of
Yeah.
damage there, so they have a lot of residual problems
Yeah.
with perchlorate.
Perchlorate, yeah, the blasting agent is.
Seems like
what started
ANFO
it.
is the preferred agent these days.
Oh,
Ammonium
nobody
nitrate.
wants perchlorate use.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
most towns actually prohibit the use of perchlorate. And
But it still leaves, the ANFO leaves nitrates and nitrites, and mostly nitrate, I would think.
Okay, great,
That's
thank you.
the 3-minute update.
So now, there's
Perfect.
Connecticut expert, Maine, and I mean, New Hampshire.
New
and Now
Hampshire.
you for
Wow.
Massachusetts.
I know experts, so I am not an expert. I have met
Everything's
some
relative.
experts, but I'm learning.
So, okay. Oh, nicely done. All right, so it's
He
7:30.
wasn't kidding when he said 3 minutes.
Yeah, 7:30, and we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement. All right, come on up. And Ellen, do we have all the green cards? Yes. Excellent. Butters?
Okay.
I'm a
Now, it
friend.
looks like we didn't, but we had the printout from the post office.
Okay.
So now I can match those up.
Good evening, for the record, Dan McIntyre, representing homeowners of 87 Carrington Ridge Road. They are...
What is that?
Are
you guys?
No, you're good. It was the microphone
okay.
bump with the stereophonic sound.
I just moved Joe off his
Okay, sorry.
The homeowners had their septic system inspection, and it failed the Title V inspection. This is Carrington Ridge Road, the corner of Wildwood Road, right down here. I think we looked at 3 Wildwood last month. This is right around the corner. The existing system is in the backyard, as well as in the front yard. It consists of a septic tank and leaching trenches with the old clay tile pipes, and the joints of the clay tile pipes just sealed up, and it was no longer functioning. So we were retained to design a new septic system. Some of the constraints we had here are wetlands, and the neighbor's well over at 63 Oldfield. So basically, we put the system back where it was so we could maintain the proper offset from the neighbor's well, but we had to reduce the regulated offset to
Where's the mark for the neighbors?
from 125 feet down to, we're right pretty much on the 50-foot buffer, but we're 55 feet from the wetlands.
So is it, because I'm friendly with them, so I know their lot pretty well. So the front is
Okay, so it's-
very steeply sloped.
It is, comes up here, yeah.
Right, so where that is it's where it's leveled off?
Yeah,
I just can't
yeah,
remember.
The backyard is.
Yeah, it's pretty level, yeah.
And it was level because I think when they built the house.
They
we found
filled.
a lot of fill there.
Yeah.
But the natural material was very good natural material.
Okay, so from my perspective, this is one of those where we have to grant a variance, but it's received Conservation Commission approval. Right. They are the wetlands experts, so if they're happy, I'm happy. Also, this looks like our usual very constrained property in terms of what space is available. And as you point out, it is really steep on one
Really
side
steep,
and fairly
yeah.
steep on another, so.
And the setback does meet Title V. So we're not requesting Title V.
Right, so there is just the one.
What is the depth to water back there? Is it, so is it,
It was about 80 inches down.
Yep, autos.
that's pretty good for
When you
around
consider
here.
the sand fill,
Well, because they.
yeah,
Right, that's true. Not natural grade.
well, yeah, when you compare it to natural grade,
Right.
it might look deeper than what it really
Right,
was.
right.
And any comments from you, Mark, on,
No, the site description was accurate. Very difficult site in respect to wetlands. Soil was good, but once you remove the fill, but obviously very wet, and so they're gonna be designing according to the groundwater. They're gonna have to raise the system a little bit, dig out the fill, stay the distance to wetlands, have erosion controls in place prior to installation, and that will all be part of our pre-construction with the installer and engineer.
and I assume that the erosion control is also part of Conservation Commission
Yes.
requirements, so there'll be a checking as well.
They'll be part of it, too, yeah.
Any other questions on this? Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so I'll close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval on?
They are ready for approval, conditional to the garbage grinder prohibition deed restriction, as well as the deed restriction for the, that's pretty much it, the garbage grinder.
Okay.
And then pre-construction. Dan knows there's a slight change that the plan will need during pre-construction on the amount of stone over the trench. We chatted about this last week, and he's modified his more recent plans to meet our code. But this can be resolved. It's a minor change of the amount of stone over the leaching trench and the size of the stone.
Okay, so that change will come in on the as-bills.
It can be reflected on the as-built and your certification statement that the correct stone was used and the correct amount. It's, the changeover, engineers are starting to change over again from the chambers, plastic manufactured chambers, to stone again. So this was a code that got forgotten by several engineers.
So do we have a motion to approve the plans, subject to receipt of the deed restriction for the garbage grinder and conditional to pre-construction conference?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good job for that, Mike.
6 minutes.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
Wish you could shut them off, but
we're always trying to streamline. Okay, so other good topics for How about we can take a moment and look at the September 11th ZBA meeting? And whether there's anything to add. It's in our information tonight.
Yeah, so there's nothing necessarily that
I don't
we
see
have
anything.
to,
Right,
okay, this is information.
right.
One's a shed, one's a deck, and one's a house too close to the, I think, the street.
To the setback, yeah,
Yeah.
the street, yeah.
And any issues with the sheds? Are
I
any
think
of
they're
those could be built on top of a septic or something that we
You
have to worry
know,
about?
I don't believe they are, but they don't offer that information when they submit these to us, but
And we would get that at the building application.
Oh, all right, so,
if it's not already pre-existing, we will get that, yes.
This says to maintain the location.
Yeah, that's why I
so
think they're
just-
pre-existing.
Yeah, they might be fixing them up or,
So if it was,
except the last one, construct a deck.
right, for the deck, but I'm
Yeah.
saying the shed and the,
but Ellen is correct, we will catch that at the building application if there's an issue.
Okay, so is there any need to just tell them
No,
our issues will be caught later? Okay. And we're seeing the building applications with regularity?
I believe so.
Okay.
I would say yes.
Okay. Uh, all right, anything else to look brief? 41 North Main Street update and input for the meeting tomorrow night of the board. So there was a letter that went out. I don't know if people were following from emails, but there have been some meetings among representatives of different boards, so I've been going, Board of Health, somebody else could go as well.
What do you,
This is on
Referring to?
41 North Main Street.
Oh.
And so George Morrow of the Select Board kind of convened this group, and there's Planning Board, other selectmen, Board of Health, ZBA. In any case, and the names of the folks who've been attending are on the last page. So they're just trying to work things out with the 41 North Main Street folks to get more details about what they're proposing, and are people aware of the general gist of what they're proposing?
I didn't know how far along they were in the planning process, but I'd heard perhaps a fairly large assisted living facility.
Right, okay, so I'll go over just the basics, and it is in the preliminary kind of design phase. So they're considering a 120-bed assisted care, I don't know all the terms exactly, I think it's assisted living situation. It's interesting that each one of those beds counts as a housing unit, and it's not an affordable project 40B at all, because they can't make it work with affordable units, so that increases our need for
Yeah,
affordable
so it
housing
actually
by
hurts us.
12 units.
Yeah.
So, and that's why one of the things in here says, we'd expect some kind of offset for that, some contribution towards that. So they're planning that for the property, maybe some retail on the property as well, possibly using the building that's there now. The care facility would be a brand-new building.
which property is this you're referring to?
This is,
Usually called the Fitzpatrick
Oh, that
property.
property.
And kind of a key piece, they're planning to use the property up Hunting Lane that was previously proposed for some housing, but to use that for water. And they would have and a public water supply, so they'd have the appropriate setback distance around a well, perhaps achievable there. But then what they'd like is to use the,
baseball field.
yes.
As
the-
a,
Septic
for
site
the
leaching
for the
drain.
wastewater treatment plant.
And
Yeah.
for the leaching fields as well, the
Because it's
SAS.
not being used for
Are these
anything.
different developers than were there previously with other projects that were being proposed? Or is this
They
the same
did come in
people?
and make a presentation last year
Right at the
about
light,
more
so if you come
of
in
just a
into
strictly
town,
retail development
so
and
much
some
costs, no
housing,
insurance companies.
possibly. That was apartments, and I can't recall if it had any 40B component to it or not last time. So this is a new proposal.
I wonder if they know that Windy Low Nursery is going to be in assisted living.
That's Trask.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that.
I think there's ample, we'll have like the full life cycle of,
Yeah.
well, we'll have 55 and over housing, then we'll have assisted living.
Exactly.
and
Yeah,
You
with
could
a
just
huge
have a
amount, we could
skilled
maybe
nursing
attract a
facility
large
next
number of.
to-
Got a cemetery, too.
Be
All
school
the-
age and
whole
die
piece.
here,
Right,
yeah.
yeah.
It's one-stop shopping.
Yeah.
I'm here for the end, for the latter part of your
But,
life.
and so I went to that, I think the sort of introductory meeting where they kind of described it mostly as like an exploratory phase. I think the other key questions that sort of came up were they had a plot when they looked at the septic leaching field as a sort of rate limiting step of here's how big the leaching field would need to be, and there was some discussion of which side of the street would the treatment portion of that be. And then there's the other piece of one of the upside benefits that they talked about was the ability to provide some developmental support for downtown. But then it was a question of, is there actually excess capacity? Because like Pine Hills leaching field is in the general vicinity, though not directly impacted, and in pretty short order, you can replace current levels, but the question of how much additional
Additional.
retail space could you support doesn't look like there was a lot of space with what was proposed, although that seemed to be part of the upside, and it looks like that's been addressed somewhat in the letter to kind of make that more
I mean,
explicit.
so I presume there must have been a broad discussion of quid pro quo if we're gonna provide you land upon which to put leaching fields, you're going to provide wastewater treatment plant facilities for all of downtown, or, and water supply, was that kind of the?
So if this board has ideas about what's important to it, so, I mean, at the meetings I've been at, I've talked about the issues of pharmaceuticals that might be concentrated from this kind of a
Assisted living,
facility
yeah.
a lot more than from a standard household
Right.
or collection of households
right.
that sums up to 120 people. So
And they have it pretty broad, like, so if you think about the different types of residential care, assisted living, you know, again, is
Cover the
pretty
gamut.
independent. But then they were also talking more like a skilled nursing, like a dementia unit, which is a very different subset of patients than an assisted living is.
Right.
And sort of the impacts of that are non-trivial.
And the other thing is that population will be increasingly susceptible to nitrogen toxicity and other things which would be not even, be totally independent of pharmaceuticals, but one of the major potential risks in that type of,
Sort of like EMS impact would be the other piece. If you have a dementia unit, your rate of hospitalization and acute healthcare use is a lot higher than in assisted living. And so again, as we think about the upside benefits for not having school-aged children, having a nuanced view of
Right, yeah.
what are all the different kinds of costs to make this a good, well-supported facility that's effective.
And what, and just because I don't know much about the permitting in particular of these types of facilities, do they have to set up relationships with nearby hospitals and, or no?
I think they have, so it depends on what level you are. There's different sets of regulations about how much you're like a healthcare facility and how much you're like an apartment unit. But there's no special, like,
know
this
if it says
nursing
it
home
here,
goes
but
to
that's
that
what I do.
hospital, or this hospital provides support for it. Although I think if you're in, I don't know about assisted living, but certainly if you're in a dementia unit, there'd be state regulations guiding that.
But I know it's been told to me that it's in the ball field.
All right, so no school-age kids, more pharmaceuticals.
end up being the same.
Right. And I think making
Financial
sure,
impact on the town.
I think my other read on at least the like having not done the subsequent meetings, but the kind of conversation with the board is I think they sort of identified that the proposal as put forward was the developer's proposal, but that it wasn't necessarily, like that, yes, that's totally your point of view. I think that there were questions about whose money goes into it, you know, how interested the town would be in providing financial support to allow a commercial development that would then use town or community property to be made
And as well
possible.
as not add to the affordable housing stock,
Right.
but count towards housing units, so it's sort of a double negative in
Yeah.
that sense.
And so, yeah, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to make a stupid comment. I was going to say that the only way we really can save costs for the town is to have a midlife crisis retreat center.
Like,
I said it was stupid, and it's not health related.
Are there such things?
Right. No,
Oh,
I'm,
okay.
a
Facetious.
yoga center.
Oh,
Yeah, we need to have a
okay.
yoga center for people in the middle age.
So something else that was
Be able
talked
to
about
drink
too
water
is,
and handle it.
would the town, since it's town land, that one would be potentially turning over or using for
Wouldn't that have to be approved
Private
at town meeting?
purposes, yeah. This would be a big deal. And they were
Yeah.
looking forward to going to the special fall town meeting. that
Oh,
we're gonna be
were
having,
they?
And they've been,
Have they
it's
ever
been
been to one of
suggested
our
that
meetings?
projects of this scale would take quite a bit of time vetting issues beforehand, and that it was unlikely, well, it could be brought up at town meeting, but it would very likely not pass because people wouldn't feel that there was enough information.
Right.
So there's been the discussion too that perhaps it would be the town that would own and operate the wastewater treatment facility. So that's just a whole other level of activity in the town for administration, because there's a lot involved with that, although you can hire companies who can
My company.
run it to some respect, but it still takes a good deal of administrative.
Plan operators, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, and you'd have to have the appropriate, let's see, some other,
what about things like also, if I were them, and this probably came up, but traffic increase, I mean, it's already an exceedingly congested, especially at rush hour, which starts at 3 o'clock apparently, and it goes from
Right,
about
exactly.
6:30 to 10.
Seven, yeah.
So,
Right,
in the
exactly.
morning, so it's a pretty wide swath.
Yeah.
And so it's not really the people necessarily who live there driving as much as all the employees and the vendors and caterers and, food supply, all of that. So, I mean, to me, traffic seems like it would be a pretty significant.
so I don't know if they've done a full traffic study, but did they mention that evening? I think they thought it would be less than some other kinds of developments because you wouldn't expect the folks living there to be traveling as much, maybe. But
But if they do, boy, it's going to slow down traffic.
But
So-
also, 120
Our
beds,
roads
that's
are
a
gonna-
lot of employees.
our
I mean,
roads are
there's,
I mean, that's a-
there's
I
a
mean, it-
decent number of employees that are.
And again, it depends a lot of, like, if you're assisted living versus a dementia unit, those ratios are probably really, really different.
I'm sure, but still, nonetheless, there's going to be a decent number
Oh,
of
yeah.
people
No,
who
it's
would
not-
have to work there. and-
Right.
Yeah, I mean, at least what I heard was very much not a nuanced, here are both perspectives. It's, as a developer, this is what we think we'd like to do. What are your thoughts? And I felt like the board was providing thoughtful feedback on their thoughts, which was not entirely congruent with the developer's ideas. And so I think that,
Not surprised.
So the Board of Health would unfortunately probably not give them feedback they're interested in either.
I think there'd be a public water supply and a public wastewater
Yeah.
Yeah,
treatment
it
for
would have
everything
to
they
be for
described, but I
something
think we
that's
could still have input to the select board and others, particularly given the impact on town lands, about what are the sets of trade-offs we're asking our community to make to support this private for-profit development.
Right.
Right.
So on the wastewater treatment, so the public water supply would be regulated by the state.
Right.
Although maybe there'd be opportunity for us to weigh in on that. I'm not sure in what way, but as a town, not as a Board of Health, but as a
Right.
town, saying if we're going to be providing support for this in various ways, then here are the requirements. And that would go for if the town was operating the wastewater treatment plant. That's what, so POTWs, publicly
Right.
owned treatment works, do. They set standards for what gets discharged to their system. And we could say, no pharmaceuticals, and they would need to manage it in some other way internally. At that meeting, they had a consultant who I think was saying, oh, it'll be fine, we'll put in some advanced treatment, but pharmaceuticals are different than other things. They're so varied that it's not easy to treat because it's just too many different kinds of chemicals that you can't say we'll put on, dissolved
extra
air
engine.
flotation and
And
some
a
extra
very
filters.
low
and-
concentration
and
An
is
extra layer on the cake.
dangerous, so.
Right, it's just, so, and it would be much more effective and make more sense financially to control that closer to the source. I just don't know if hospitals have already been experimenting with more innovative approaches to that, like diverting.
I know that at the Mass General, they have one of those I forget what the, where they take their own wastewater and they generate energy with it.
Is it
That's
wastewater?
promoted
Waste
by,
to-
but it's
waste to
not,
energy?
it's not
Recycling gray water?
denitrification, it's not, it's
Never heard of that.
denitrification, it's wastewater recycling, but it's not specifically addressing
It's incinerated.
pharmaceuticals and, opiates and other pharmaceuticals,
Incineration.
chemotherapy drugs, heavy metals, like that, there's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but that would be interesting. But they also don't drink the water, like it's not for drinking water, it's for other purposes.
Okay.
But that was one of the things that I had I gave a little thing to Van Trask, and I said, would you consider looking at this as a potential approach to solve some of the septic issues, because the water can be used for toilets and whatever.
Oh, very well.
But it,
Yeah, that's
so
a Mass
I-
DEP regulated,
so
although
I
they
wasn't,
have loosened up on that.
And we-
so.
and
But I don't know
California's
about the
been
pharmaceuticals.
doing it for decades, so
Yeah.
and we have a lot of offices in California, so
Yeah.
I have a lot of
But the
information
drinking
on
water
that.
comes from, the mountain range.
Yeah.
I just want to keep us on
Yes.
schedule because
Yeah.
we've got a
We have a hearing.
7:50.
Oh, and we've
Sorry.
already passed it. Okay.
No.
So, all right, back to, we'll come back to this afterwards. All right, so it's 7:50 and we have a variance hearing for a septic replacement on 8 Woodland. And butter.
Is 8 Woodland on so is 8
Exactly
Woodland
in the
close to, is that near
Of
the
course, if you want to look
freeway
at
stop
plans while we're
sign?
talking about them, you're
Yeah,
welcome
okay.
to come up.
It's down by Route 27.
Oh, I know, it's the one that's for sale. I know exactly. where it is. I drive by it every day.
Is that the one with the, oh, it's on the left.
It's on the left.
Not
as
the
you're heading
tennis,
towards
the tennis
27.
courts, so like right before.
Not the
27.
tennis court, it's the last one.
Right before.
Dan McIntyre representing the homeowners of 8 Woodland. They're in the process of selling the family home. The lot is located down on the South Main Street side of Woodland. It's the last house on the lot. The existing system is in the backyard here. We know there's a septic tank we found. There's really no details of the leaching system itself, but it is right up against the wetlands right here. So there's really, right now, there's really no separation between the wetlands and the existing system. The well is in the front yard. There's a number of constraints on this lot, primarily the wetlands which come through here, and we got 3 abutters wells that we needed to take into consideration. So there's really no practical way to put it back where it is now. So we searched around the lot and we found an area up in this area. Fortunately, there's a big enough lot where we could find an area to do that. We maintained the proper separations from this well at 148 South Main Street, right up over here. There's also another well across the street. We maintain that separation. And because of the soils, it's less than 2 minutes per inch soils here, so we had to add that 25 feet to everything. Both of these are down gradient, which is 150 feet plus a 25, so.
175.
We had to find some place where it was 175 feet, which we were able to do.
Wow.
We
Just
weren't-
barely.
Good.
Just barely, just barely.
Thank
we were able to do it. We weren't able to find the proper offset for the on-site well. We made the standard 125, but we couldn't get that extra 25 feet.
So it meets Title 5, but not,
It would
but
be-
not
it
with the
meets-
additional.
Right. It
Because of
meets
the perk
Sherburne
rate.
except for that extra 25
Okay.
feet. We looked at pushing it over this way here, but this test pit showed a lot of junky fill was put in here. And we'd rather just keep it here to the natural soil rather than trying to take out that fill and replace it. The other setback we couldn't meet was the setback to wetlands. 125 feet in Sherburne, we were able to maintain the 80 feet off this one point here. Obviously, it's more further away from the main body of the wetlands, but it did protrude up there, and that's why we got an 80-foot setback there. We did go to the Conservation Commission. They did approve it, so we have that. There are a couple, in addition to the wetlands and the well offset, we're also asking for a variance for, well, it's not a variance, a Title V waiver for the groundwater.
Relative to the inlet and outlet?
Yes.
Okay, so, oops. Mark, any particular comments on this? It looks like another lots of constraints.
Very
and-
well, and Dan keeps finding these homes. Homes. It's the same type of situation, the other one where
You have wetlands and as explained, as well as a good soil rate, but the problem is once you get a good soil perk rate, you have to increase all your well distances, but based on what's out there, this is an improvement, so I don't see a problem with the requested waivers.
We're actually, for this well here, we're actually, doesn't even meet the 100 feet now, so it's a big improvement for the neighbor here.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions at the moment? Can always have more as we go through, but do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1AC?
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2?
So moved.
Second.
Any other comments on that? And this, again, is the one that has to do with distance to wetlands that Concom has approved. So all those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
And do we have a motion to grant a variance to 15.4051J? And
Which is a
this is
local
going to be with the secure fittings, the boots of some sort, or whatever, where there are penetrations, is that how this is?
We went with a heavy-duty tank to prevent and watertight.
And how long do these last when they're in these kind of conditions?
Well, they're rubber, so they should last.
The yellow water tank?
They have, but you don't always get a good
Okay, motion.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, I'll close the hearing, and
The plan is ready for approval, conditional to a deed recording for the garbage grinder and pre-construction, and with the same notes made previously that we'll review the stone, and this will be the last plan we'll see like this.
Well, I think I was able to revise this one, but I had to make some revisions.
Oh, that's right, you did the dual alternating, so we don't need to worry about that part on this plan.
okay.
Thank you, Dan.
So do we have a motion to approve the plans, subject to receipt of the garbage grinder deed restriction and to pre-construction conference?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So 7 or 8 minutes.
I'll put it,
Good
go in the
stuff.
mail tomorrow.
I want to keep you
Have a
happy
good night.
over here.
Yeah.
Good night.
I wanna be here.
Here's the
Next one, it's either
local upgrade approval you need to sign. Give me a second.
Top of the hill, the soil,
I have a rush.
it's balls.
I don't think I've ever hit that street.
There's the cul-de-sac at the end of the road. Yeah. There's the system. His perk rates wouldn't do them, there's so much.
Where were we? Okay, we have 10 minutes to keep talking about,
Design rate, that makes,
what are we talking about? Oh,
and has us.
41 North Main. So, so I had a few notes on 41 North Main. EMS services is sort of a fire department, but maybe it'd be worth mentioning to them for their meeting to remember that. Or that may be too far down the line in terms of the details. And traffic studies, I believe, they usually have to do for a project. For Board of Health, aside from how wastewater is managed, is there anything else we need to ask now? And I'd also say anyone who wants to go to the meeting, feel free. And
Senior night. So one other question. So in terms of figuring out the sizing of things like the wastewater treatment plant capacity and water supply, based on, let's say if it was a 120-bed unit, but they also have to have additional supply because there's workers there, there's food preparation and all of that. Do our regulations
no, they go to the state for that.
So they just
There
use the default, whatever the state
There are tables
requires.
for
Okay.
different kinds of operations, and then
Okay.
it gets calculated from there. So something that they keep talking about is that, a system of size X could be built, and then they only need some portion of that, and then the town would have a system that could be used for others in the downtown area. So there is this question, though, number 5 here, about there's another property. So I think beyond the one where they currently anticipate putting the public water supply well.
That was like right on the other side of the railroad tracks or something like that was where the water supply property was.
Right, and apparently there's another property that they own, and so that's why this question's been brought up, is, are there development plans for that?
That would
And
be
might that
supported
use
by
up the
the
rest of the
capacity.
capacity? Or would it be suitable maybe for the wastewater treatment facility? So that was just to get an understanding. At the meeting that we went to, the first one, they said they had no plans currently for that property. So-
And is that property as well zoned commercial?
I don't know where that third property
Right,
is.
that's what I'm wondering.
So,
My recollection was that it was fairly sizable, though, from what was said at the meeting.
And how big is the
41 North Main, it's pretty small, I think. It's like 6 or 8 acres.
really?
but then there's a property across the railroad tracks that stretches up. It has a home on it now, but it's a relatively large piece of property.
Does anyone live there?
Because the other thing,
The former residence.
if the property where the actual development is going to be is relatively small, you're talking about taking a pervious surface right now and putting building and pavement and parking. So the recharge is going to be different, the whole stormwater flow is going to be completely different, and I just wonder is that going to cause things like flooding onto Route 16 and the railroad area, the roads, is it going to enhance deterioration of those, or is it going to cause flooding in other, properties that are on Main Street? So just, we're shifting the equation a lot when you're talking about taking a parcel right now that's largely just open and pervious and vegetated to something that's,
Not.
completely paved. So.
So that brings to mind low-impact stormwater management methods that try to reinfiltrate water closer to where it lands to the extent possible. And those have proven in practice to be less costly than the old-fashioned methods of, diverting to a large holding pond somewhere. There's something else. Oh, so that often gets looked at, what happens with stormwater often gets looked at by conservation, but maybe only if there's wetlands around to be impacted. But there is, and planning board, would look at that. But also, Mark, isn't there something in our regulations that talks about, we don't want a net increase or
No increase or
decrease
decrease
of,
off or on site.
I believe, 10%?
Yeah, we did change it
stormwater.
to allow a percentage. That's in our environmental impact requirements under section 3 of our codes.
So I know it came up in the past where someone was developing the property and there was a slope and there was concern about the water shedding off of their property onto the road and then freezing and creating, this big ice slick there.
Hazard.
So that does come up for us periodically. So.
So the meeting's tomorrow?
Yeah, I don't know if it's got something scheduled, or I haven't looked at the select
Agenda.
board agenda yet, so.
I can't make it, but I trust you guys, and I'll bring back info.
I was planning to go to the meeting because of the Public Safety Committee.
Oh, okay. But, all right, so, again, it seems, it's a little loose at the moment. We're just trying to get ideas and major ideas and issues out for consideration. Okay. 2 minutes. Have you identified a 2-minute item?
Taste of the Grange?
Oh, the food establishment
Yeah.
permit? Okay. All right, so we have a temporary food establishment permit for the Grange Fair, which is
Yep,
coming up.
There's two. Beth did send me an email recommending approval by the board on both of the two. One for the Taste of the Grange, which is on Friday night, and then for the food tent, I guess, at the Grange Fair on Saturday.
Okay, and so she's gone over things and everything looks,
Yeah, she said she has a few loose ends to take care of, but she expects them not to be a problem, and she would like to have the permits with her for her inspections.
all right. So, do you want us to do these one at a time?
Yeah, it should
Okay.
be.
So do we have a motion to approve the permit for Rockstar?
Yep. Rockstar Foods.
Rockstar, anyway, foods for the Taste of the Grange.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And do we have a motion to approve the temporary one-day food establishment permit for the Grange Fair itself on the Saturday, the 15th?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, and it is 8:10, and we have a variance hearing for septic replacement. And is there anyone who's here for this particular variance hearing? Okay, so the engineer is going to present the reasons that the variances are being requested, and if you'd like to come up and look onto the plans as he's explaining things, feel free to do so.
Okay, so we did get all the green cards.
Oh, yes,
All that,
thank
all that has been submitted.
Are you ready? Good evening, everyone. Paul Solomon for Supply Solutions and the applicant at 26 Coastal Road. It's the end of the cul-de-sac. Cul-de-sac is here. House locus is here. Existing cesspools in the back of the house. Approximately 60 feet from the well.
Gas line.
Soils were very slow perking. When we did the soil testing, we had groundwater intrusion, so we weren't able to do a perk test. So some of the variances you're going to see are related to taking a soil sample and having the particle analysis done at UMass. The other major issues were distance to the on-site well, and in order to get as much of that as we can, we're looking to go 10 feet to property line in compliance with Title V. But Sherman, of course, requires 20, so that's another variance. The applicant has agreed to install a faster geoflow, so we're providing that advanced treatment, which hopefully will compensate for some of these variances.
Where's the neighbor's well on the side that they're,
Across the street, it's here. We're required to be 150 feet from that. That's here, so we're probably 180. Right there.
and what about on?
It's on 19
this side?
Harrington, the one where we're abutting the
Yeah,
property
the
line.
one that you're closer to the property line.
Yeah, there's nothing over here. There's another house down. There's another road that comes up here in a cul-de-sac,
Oh, okay.
but there was nothing.
There's not a
within
house
200
there?
feet.
Oh, okay,
Nothing
okay.
within 200
So the property boundary that they're a little bit closer to than our regulations is not, it's not a developed parcel?
There's a house on it, but it's like way up here.
Okay.
And are you
And how
one of
much,
the
how big is
abutters?
the property?
Oh, okay.
How big is the land that you have to work in?
The lot is just over an acre by the year, 53,000.
Small.
So, and again, by using the fast and the geoflow, we're not taking down any of the trees. It's all been in around.
Trees get to stay. Yeah, they can go around them.
So with that,
Okay, so it'll be squiggly compared to
yeah,
what's here now.
they'll lap around that, yeah. The lines are placed, by the way, 4 feet apart in order to allow for the reserve area, which isn't really required under Title V when you're placing the system, but otherwise you could do it 2 feet apart. We would just narrow this down some, but it would still give us the requirement. So with that, under the Sherman rules and regulations,
Hold on one second. So, Mark, any general comments on?
No, it's a different type of design. You do have the geoflow, which allows you to go around trees, so that's why they can save the trees here. They do have to do a limit of excavation, so hopefully they won't damage the trees in that, but that is required as part of the plan. But as noted, it's pretty much wooded on the upper side to where the street was supposed to go through, so there are no houses in that area. And the well for the abutter across the street is right underneath the profile of the septic tank. It's always fun finding your wells, Paul. But it's, you know, meets code with the waivers granted.
Okay, and I'm assuming that, well, once you complete the circle here,
going around this way.
yeah, you lose most of that part of the property. And then
Right. Yeah, here's
Probably
the
there's a
property
well
line.
over here somewhere.
Again, quite a ways away.
Okay, all right, so it really, and then that.
They have to excavate.
Okay, so it looks like that is maybe the only spot on the property that could possibly work.
Yeah, I mean, we could keep moving it, but it doesn't increase the distance here.
You're trying to dig around.
Okay. Anyone have any particular questions before?
Yeah, what happens over here?
Nothing happens up there right now.
No, but if you moved, it's the property line here that you're requesting a waiver from,
Right.
so it doesn't change, there's no way to
Yeah.
get farther away.
Yeah,
That's
and you-
kind of what I'm
you're gonna
asking.
be 10 feet from that if you
Right.
want
Yeah.
to get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could actually just read each one since we've gone through. If everyone's okay with that? All right, so are you okay if we just
Yes,
kind of
absolutely.
streamline it? All right. So do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 1.2?
So moved?
Second.
Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 5.1D?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to grant a variance to section 8.02.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the board, of course, is reading what all the variances are for as we're going through. If anyone wants to know, we do have that documentation.
Sort of discussed them in the presentation.
Yes, and we did. Let's see, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.1 BC?
So moved. And one quick question, did you say right now the septic's like
Yeah,
The
tell us
cesspool.
about the existing
The
septic system.
cesspool's there, the well is here, that's about 60 feet.
60, so it's going from 60 to 104, and it's a fast system, so that's
It's
a
better
drastic
anyway.
improvement.
It's improving their drinking
Right.
water.
It's actually being treated,
Right.
as opposed to just stuck in the ground.
Right.
Okay. Did we get a motion?
I moved it, yes.
And I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2? This is the property line one.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
And now we're on the Title V local upgrade approval, and so this,
Again, like we had on the previous
so
one,
the
because-
tank is in,
Yeah, the groundwater is so high here that by the time you get 2 feet below grade, the inlets and outlets from the tanks are 100 feet below the seasonal high groundwater. So we have these rubber boots cast in place when the tank is made, and the 4-inch PVC pipe goes in it, and then they clamp it down around it so it'll be watertight.
and then seasonal high should only be kind of a temporary phenomenon too.
Although, you didn't say how much into the water table, so like, is it gonna be within 3 inches of
Tell
5
you,
inches?
Let's see, we'll figure it out. Seasonal high groundwater is, well, it's recorded as 28 inches below grade over the entire site. So let's say where the septic tank is, it's elevation 99, and the invert of the pipe
6.2
going into the tank is 96.3, so it's minus 28, 99 would be 97.5, so we're almost a foot below the seasonal high groundwater.
It's right there.
Oh,
That's if and when it happens.
okay.
Anything else? All right, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 15.4051J?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And lastly, do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 15.4051I?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Just in terms of form, so when it's the same variance, even though one's for Title V and one's for Sherburne, can you not put them together? Because you have to say
It's
them,
just easier to
Okay.
do it separately.
but, because it's the same variance.
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay.
And we, as a board, we're given the authority by NASB to grant the variances to Title V, so. Okay, so I'll close the hearing, and are the plans ready for approval?
Conditional to pre-construction, as I always say, but conditional to a deed recording for the garbage grinder and for the use of a notice, for the use of an alternative system.
Okay,
And this system does require maintenance and a contract prior to us issuing a certificate of compliance. Just for the minutes, it's not part of the motion.
okay, so
for-
that'll come on the certificate of
Yeah, we won't
compliance.
issue the
We don't need a
certificate.
condition now.
The GeoFlow/Fast Company, the Fast Company will send us a certification and a maintenance agreement and show they have a contract to maintain.
Okay,
It's usually JR is the company that does all that work.
okay, so do we have a motion to approve the plans subject to receipt of deed restrictions for the garbage grinder and IA technology?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Yeah,
Good luck.
sign the second page. Thank you.
So,
I think we're going to discuss your... Okay,
I
yeah.
guess we should
They didn't know they had a time.
start at 8:30, just in case anyone comes explicitly at 8:30.
Yeah, it's a
for that
timed
appointment, so-
appointment, yeah.
Okay, so did we finish up pretty much with 41 North Main? If anyone comes up with anything, dreams of anything, just send a note.
Do you think we should give any input to the ZBA about the septic discussion we were having in the event that it is relevant to conversation with the developer?
I think ZBA isn't too involved in this just yet, but I've
It's mostly the
noticed.
select
Oh,
board.
it's
Yeah,
selectmen,
select
selectmen,
board,
sorry.
yeah.
Or to the selectmen, like, are you, anyone here in communication with them?
Yeah, I've been attending the meetings that
So
I've been
they,
having.
so you do comment and
Oh, yeah.
they get some of this input?
Well, let's see. There are a bunch of things on here
Yeah.
that are related to Board of Health,
Well, that's
because
good.
that is some of the bigger concerns.
Well, I didn't know
is-
if we need to give them some communication, but if you're involved in the process, then it's
Yeah.
already happening.
They did want, yeah, since their meeting is tomorrow and they just issued this, I thought it was kind of lucky that we had a meeting tonight, so that if we wanted to pass anything else on to them, so I'll try to make sure either go or I'll send them a note just about
So,
additional issues.
And just to clarify, so I'm planning to be at the meeting tomorrow because of the Public Safety Committee part. I hadn't even looked at the agenda, so I wasn't aware of what was on. Both of us will there, but we still won't be.
No,
a quorum.
it won't be a quorum, so it's
So
totally
it's okay.
permissible.
And even if anyone else shows up, we just have to agree not to talk directly or make decisions, so,
Yeah,
as a group. But we could offer kind of independent Board of Health perspective ideas. so.
it won't be relevant because it's kind of detailed stuff.
Oh, to their discussion?
I mean, it's conceptually worth considering that that subset of the population may have other challenges associated with it. People usually
I
tend to
think they
think
just
of
also
only in
need to
terms
pin
of
down,
the-
is it an assisted living or a dementia
Yeah.
unit? I think that's the other piece of just more specificity of what will these
Yeah,
rooms be used for, are
yeah,
really
that's right,
different.
that's right, yeah.
Despite supporting older
So, there-
adults.
I mean, I doubt that we're going to be getting into that kind of a detail at this sort of meeting.
But even if you were, it would be allowed because you guys don't represent a
Yeah.
quorum.
Right, so that's my question. Thank you.
So DJ Morris Contracting Company of Sudbury disposal works permit?
I just want to mention
Oh, yeah.
one more thing about the meeting tomorrow. So part of the meeting for tomorrow with the Select Board is they're hoping that, since the developers have had this letter, that they may also be offering more ideas about, or reactions to some of these topics. So it'll be, hopefully there'll be new information and their thoughts. So that's hard to predict. Okay, so what have you?
Disposal works installer permit?
Ooh, yes, very nice. Anything, have they checked out? Good standing?
Yeah, they've been permitted in town before as well.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the permit for DJ Morris?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, you sign this.
And Ellen, do you want to, oh, wait a minute. 5 minutes?
I think we can do West Nile in 5 minutes.
Okay.
I have some edits.
Sure. Can I just sign
And
this?
this is
copy
approved
from-
conditional to a pre-construction conference. Well, when you vote, did you vote? You haven't
Yeah.
voted yet, have you?
We voted.
Oh, you did?
We were all
When I was
ayes.
writing.
That's okay.
All right, so Ellen, do you want to give a little update on the West Nile virus? And take notes and do everything else at the same time?
Can you do this?
Well, just that, this morning I was notified by DPH that they found a positive West Nile virus mosquito pool in Sherburne. It's in the Russet Hill area. I talked with Central Mass Mosquito Control. They will be spraying, expanding their spray area, is how he worded it, and do the roads closest to where the mosquito pool was found and then expand out a little bit. And they'll do that tomorrow night. The police will send out a code red to that area tomorrow morning so that people will be aware, and they'll be instructed to, close the windows. The spraying will take place after sunset, and they'll be done before midnight.
I think it's also like bringing pets or
Bring
other
pets
animals
inside,
inside,
yeah.
and
And
kids not playing
kids,
outside in the
yeah.
period of spray.
Yeah.
So the reason I asked Ellen to check, and I'm glad that the police could do it, to do that reverse 911 is, since when I lived in Cambridge, they were spraying for West Nile, and it was early on. And we had arrived home late with our infant. And we're unpacking the car and holding the kid, and I heard a rumble. I'm like, well, that's a weird sounding noise. I wonder what that is. And we turned around to get sprayed by the trucks going by. And it turned out, so we went to a meeting because we wanted to find out what we were sprayed with. And lots of people were there from around Cambridge who felt they got no notification that it was happening. They all had their windows open. I mean, people were very upset, and I have to say, when we saw the look of the officials' faces when they found out that we were sprayed and our baby, just how concerned they were that that had happened did not make me very happy. So, and they didn't really say much more about it. So in any case, I just felt it would be important to have people aware, because there are apparently a lot of people who want to have the spraying because they don't want to have to be exposed to West Nile virus, but then there's the flip side of it is a chemical. And
So there's an opt-out that I think was included in the notification, but it's
Yeah.
like a sort of internet form.
Right.
And will the police community, so we've got this posted on the Board of Health website?
Well, I've requested the Selectmen's office to put it on the main page.
On the main
so
page,
it'll be
okay, right up
there.
front.
I checked tonight, it's not there yet, so I'm hoping it'll get posted first thing in the morning.
And do we know if the details of where to find that information will be included in
About
the?
opting out.
Well, just like if I think about the reverse, the sort of code red notification, if I were
Yeah.
somebody who said, I want to opt out, I would love to have that
Yes,
included.
I've
since I'm-
asked
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ginny to put that on the,
And
on
the
main
decision
page.
to spray, is there a state regulation that says if a mosquito is identified, the community is sprayed? Or is it at request of the community or an individual?
They recommended spraying. They asked me, do I want them to continue? And after being at a department head meeting today, when I told the other department heads, I felt that it would be beneficial. I did call Darrell, but I did give the okay.
Because I mean, I think, honestly, I think that this is something worth considering at some point. West Nile virus has been around for a really long time, as are a lot of other infectious diseases and pathogens that are not, some of which are much more contagious, infectious, deadly, and prevalent, frankly, and with potential global warming and other changes in the natural environment, we may be seeing these things all the time, and I wonder how much the same populations are at risk, as have always been, but people, it's sort of this, it creates a little bit of hysteria, but I don't know that it's a high contagion risk, unlike other things which are highly, highly contagious with respiratory droplets, and so I don't know whether, I mean, it's a bigger discussion. I'm sure it's happening at the state level for these reasons, because.
I think if we're going to discuss it more in terms of
Yeah.
a broader policy, we
Well,
probably
that's
need to
why I was
have it on an
saying-
agenda, but it seems like it would be a great topic.
I don't want
for
to talk
future.
about it now, but I'm saying, that's what I'm saying, it might be something to consider for a future time, because,
Sounds great.
No, I would like to do it because automatically spraying to me is not,
yeah,
but I recognize it's my sensitivity about weighing,
no, but
applying some personal
Yeah.
protection versus
Yeah.
broadly spraying and thinking that that takes care of it, and also giving people the idea that it's taken care of, so then they're not taking the
Vigilant,
personal
right.
protection precautions that they might otherwise do. And so I think it'd be worth discussing.
know
But
these
clearly
discussions are
there,
happening.
last year or a couple of years ago, we had an issue where a mosquito was found, and certainly the reaction of other boards and committees was to of course, there should be reverse 911 to the whole town, and the Board of Health advised against that, and
Yeah.
it was
So
dealt with
it's-
differently, but
Yeah.
it would be interesting, I think, to discuss, and good to have it at another meeting, because there are people out there, so while we may be concerned and others are concerned about the spray, there's another set of people who are saying, I want to make sure that my street gets sprayed as well.
That's
So
me.
there's a difference,
Yeah.
you know, so.
And it, it's a big, and so some of the long-term implications of these conversations are, what's the cost-benefit ratio, and et cetera? Are we really accomplishing our goal?
So,
So,
okay.
we should
So-
talk
Sounds
about
like
it.
broad enthusiasm for a future meeting.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I can try, and if I can find something, because I know some of these conversations are happening
Elsewhere.
not in Sherburne,
Yeah.
in bigger arenas, I can try to report back, too.
Awesome.
Okay.
That'd be great.
And if you could also find out in particular what they're using in the spray, like which pesticides. I know they picked lower toxicity ones,
Yeah.
but I'd actually like to know which
Yeah.
Is it possible for us to find that out from the central?
Oh, yeah, we can definitely find
You
that
can
out.
definitely find that out. I just
Yeah.
won't be here tomorrow or Monday, so.
And I think that one of
I
the
think
things,
that's fine.
one of the big
Actually, if you run up
concerns-
to the truck, they are supposed to be carrying the SDS on the truck with
The
them.
MSCS,
Yeah, and one of the concerns is resistance.
Yes.
It's not necessarily.
So I think we're going to have a broader
Yeah.
conversation. It's
That's
8:33.
Cost
Yep.
benefit, right, risks, et cetera.
Okay, so, all right. So now we are going to talk about a review of engineering information to allow event rentals in the barn at 195 Western Avenue.
So I need to recuse myself from this one because I'm in a butter.
Oh, okay.
Good evening again.
Hi.
I'm here with Jonathan Hanson-Walker, the owner.
Good evening.
Hi.
How you guys?
And again, this presentation is to get a sense of the board for proposed use for the big red barn at 195 Western Avenue. Jonathan has been before the planning board. The intent here is to use the barn as a rental facility for events, things like weddings, bar mitzvahs, birthday parties, what have you. He proposes a maximum use of 200 people per event. I'll give you just a sense of the site. Here's Western Avenue. There's an entrance here, the current barn is here. Currently, there's a employee's kitchen and some employee restrooms. That's connected with a septic tank that runs down through here. There's actually 3-bedroom residence here that's also connected. Wastewater runs down then and connects to the main house here. Cuts across the street, and then the leaching field for all of this is located over here. Let me just get rid of this for a minute. I'm sure that'll help you. Then across the street, the existing leaching field is actually oversized. So-
When you say across the street, is it across
Across
Pleasant
Pleasant
Street? Okay.
Yeah, so you come across Pleasant, down the hill, there's a pump chamber at the bottom of the hill, and then it's pumped up to here. There was a lot of testing done here. There exists beyond the current leaching field, test pits 18 and test pit 17, both of which showed soils and groundwater that meets the requirements for Sherburne construction. The groundwater could be within 5 feet per crate, not a historical.
So-
sediment trench.
When I went through the notes, it looked like maybe that system isn't so old. Is it
Isn't so wet.
old?
It was like
Is it from-
mid-90s, right?
Yeah, I don't
98,
know.
99 timeframe?
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you say it's oversized, what
Well, there's,
about it
it's,
is oversized?
I'll have to dig
Because
out
it
my
looked
notes.
like it also, there were a number of meetings where they're coming in and. it
About the
was
room count.
always bumping up against the number of bedrooms or something. And at one point, it was noted as being 60 gallons over.
That's correct.
Right, that's the last,
March 5th, 2015 was when that was discussed.
or 2014.
Gallons
I think it had 60 gallons left.
Yeah.
That's my recollection.
The
was 60 gallons
capacity
over the
was
capacity.
only 60 gallons more than,
Because it was a sort
than
of
what it
question of the
should,
room counts
than what it
across.
was required to have,
All right.
correct?
So,
Correct.
Yeah.
so at this point, the proposal,
Bless you.
is what I'd like to do is try to explain the basis for the estimated flow. Title V has one estimated flow for a function hall, and it's 15 gallons a day per person. They don't explain whether the function hall would include preparation of food and cleanup afterwards on site, like a Sheraton Tara or a golf course where you rent a facility. But knowing Title V, I'm sure they didn't assume it's going to be one like we're proposing here, which is nothing is prepared on site, it's all brought in by a caterer. It's probably on real dishware, silverware, glasses. They're all then packed up and taken off-site. There's going to be
No
no dishwasher
dishwashing,
on
yeah.
site for any of that. All they'll do is pack up their garbage, pack up all the dishes, take it away when it's over. So the majority of the water, there's going to be some rinsing, obviously. There'll be some ovens for heating food, and there'll be some refrigeration capacity to keep other foods
When you say
cold.
some rinsing, like that,
Pardon?
when you say some rinsing, help me understand what that means.
Well, they're gonna probably take some water, put, I don't know, put clams in it, cook them right then.
They might have to heat things up
Yeah,
that
and
need
then
water.
maybe pour that down the drain, right? And so there'll be some water. There'll be no garbage grinder. Obviously, normally you would put a grease trap under a sink in this case. You have a three-bay sink. So there'd be some bits of food, maybe lettuce and things, but the caterer is expected to clean up after himself. If he doesn't do it properly, typically he's not allowed back. We weren't able to find a lot of comparable facilities. The one I used, were you folks able to, did you get the
The
data
Holliston.
beforehand?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm using the Holliston Historical Society barn. Barn, just like this is a barn, you know, it's not the walled off. So, in the case of the Historical Society, we have a whole list, and I think you've seen it on the events that we've held this past year. It's all the same events. It's weddings, bar mitzvahs, birthday parties, wedding showers, baby showers, conferences and seminars, so we run the gamut. It's interesting that the data, I got all the individual daily flows from the water department. Some of the numbers were way out of line, some were 25 gallons a day for use, and others were 1 gallon a day for use. But to exclude a couple of the really high ones and the really low ones, I came out with an overall average of 5.7 gallons per day.
So, but the tent is used a lot in Holliston, and you guys aren't proposing to also have a tent available, or are you?
Somebody may have a tent, but this will be for the actual building itself. They've got a tent, they've got more people there, you've got probably Paula Johnson.
Holliston is authorized for 100 people in the barn, so if we get a rental for more than 100, they have to put a tent down.
Right.
They're not allowed to do
So my corollary is in terms of like bathrooms.
that. Okay.
So, there's enough bathrooms within that structure to serve whatever, 80 or 100 people.
Or 150.
So if you have more than that and people use a tent, do they bring porta potties?
No.
They still rely
Yeah,
strictly
we
on the
have 2
bathroom?
bathrooms in the barn.
Okay, and so the barn has 2 bathrooms.
Right.
We're putting more bathrooms in it to accommodate the additional people.
So what's the
His proposal
plan?
would be
I think it's 4 bathrooms.
4 bathrooms total.
So 2 more.
And the public would, I think you said the public wouldn't be using the employee bathrooms.
No, this will be for the entire building with 4 bathrooms.
Right. So 4 new bathrooms.
Building code for that.
Okay, so 4 new bathrooms.
The 2 bathrooms are existing, there
Yeah.
were 2 additional bathrooms built. I think one has to have a urinal and an enclosed toilet for men. I think the ladies' bathroom has to have 2 extra cubicles, and they have to be ADA accessible.
Right, I was gonna say that, yeah.
The other issue with using the Holliston Historical Society barn is that we do have 2 full-time caretakers who live in the house, and we only have 1 meter for the entire facility. And we also have sprinkler systems and lawn sprinkling as well.
And so presumably those are sort of high outlier days where irrigation related.
Right. Yeah, that's.
So you're saying at the Holliston Society, there's 2
Right.
people who live in the house? You're not talking about
No, right.
the proposal?
So I'm saying,
Okay.
using our numbers, I came up with 5.9. I subtracted
5.7.
60 gallons a day to accommodate the 2 people that live there. Under Title V, it should be 110. So I'm fairly conservative, I
Yeah.
think. It's.
And so we're saying
I
that,
don't think I've driven the number down too low.
You think you're biasing it high if you're
for this,
biasing
'cause
it?
it's
Yeah.
New construction.
Yeah.
and so I just want to make sure, so what we're saying is on the day that 200 guests were there, we're saying 1,200 gallons of water would be used, is what we're estimating?
Well, if you used 5, it'd be 1,000 gallons.
Okay. What was your number? Was it 5 or?
5.7,
Yeah,
so
I
closer to
called it
6.
6.
yeah.
So, and we're saying that all of that water, or most of that water, is then going into, I mean, right now we're saying they're doing light rinsing. We're not, I mean, are we saying that it's also 1,000 gallons a day of septic effluent that we're generating if we're not generating or using water for food preparation or other pieces? Like, where's the water you're using going?
In this case or in Hollis?
Well, so if we say we're
This
using
case.
1,200 gallons, where is that 1,200 gallons going after it's used? Is it going to
That's
this?
going into the septic system.
All of it,
That would be
yeah.
expanded. And I think I've shown evidence that the system could be expanded under the Sherburne rules for new construction.
So, because you're saying it's going to meet all of the requirements about separation to groundwater,
There's room there to do it.
And it's a post-Title V system, which is another criteria that the state has for adding on.
Because it's not a
So-
failed system, so we have
No,
to
no.
meet, we have
Right.
to meet the Sherburne regs.
Right.
right.
And
He's
if
saying
it
he
does-
does.
right.
He would.
Right,
We're
yeah,
not-
that's good.
We're not asking
That's
to
good.
replace it, we just want to.
Yeah, no, I
And
understand, that's
I guess the question I
good.
have is like, what are the, like, there's one piece with your use case is a bunch that as we think about this system and facility will be in place for many years. Like, how does one adjudicate that as you sell your property at some future date to sort of say, this has this system, but we won't do on-site food preparation? Like, how do we?
They wouldn't have, then maybe you'd be looking at what Title V says is a function hall.
But I think then we've got an approved facility that they say, well, for 10 years they've done this, and you're now telling me that as I get ready to sell, or I've now bought this property, I can't do food preparation. For us, if, it sounds like what we're being asked to approve is the increased capacity of the septic system to accommodate a flow rate that's either 1,000 or 3,000 gallons, depending on whether we consider a Title V function hall or extrapolate the data from Holliston.
Okay.
But then that's predicated on the idea of here's the use case. So we have 200 guests, you're not doing food prep. How do I enforce 10 years from now that you're not doing food prep? Because if you suddenly say, oh, we're actually doing a lot of food prep here, what we're putting into the septic system is a different category of material than rinse water and
Okay,
toilet.
so maybe, Mark, would you like to
Sure, well,
take that question? On the, if there's a change of use down the road, as they're saying they wouldn't do food prep now, what if somebody does food prep later? What are the
And-
mechanisms for catching that and that whole change of use? I
Mitigating
know
that
it's something
risk.
that you,
change of use does require that you upgrade your septic system, so I think that's why the presentation tonight. So if there was another change of use, you have to again evaluate and determine the flow, so
Yeah,
if
but-
that change of use was for.
But how are we going to know that
No,
that's
right.
happening?
So,
Right,
like-
that's really
So
more
if
the
they
question.
said, I do this differently now, and I've got the bathroom accommodations and the physical plant, what's the Board of Health's pathway to have notification of that? Not from you changing your use, but somebody.
Building application would be the one.
But so if
way
there's
that
no
would-
change in the
They're not
physical
gonna-
plant.
But
They're not gonna do
you guys
anything
aren't
else.
going to have all the stuff that would be needed to
Right.
do full-scale
But
food prep,
you could
right?
put in a bunch of dishwashers without needing building permit,
Well,
right?
you have to put the ranges in.
You
Yeah,
actually,
no.
that's
Don't-
one of
don't
my,
you need to get it?
well, that's
But
one
how
of my
much-
notes.
Just a question for for you, or,
Yeah. Remind me on the
the
food.
category that we're in now, how much would it increase the capacity or require? How much capacity would be required to be able to accommodate that increased use now? How'd that compare with what you're requesting now? Is it a dramatic difference, or is it a negligible difference? Would it be, would it be worth if you're going?
If there was
Yeah.
food
Yeah,
prep,
if you're going through the process.
Yeah, there's a big
right, If you're
difference.
going through the process of changing the septic, why not just make it big enough for that?
I would say it's significant once you
Yeah.
go to
Yeah, it's
food
different.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And also, your assumptions seem to be really different than the assumptions in the notes from the former Board of Health meetings, which said that there's only 60 gallons of
I think your
excess
point is that
capacity.
we would add to the system, not that this would,
Yeah.
like, I
Right,
think.
but it's saying there was an assumption in here that there's already like 700 gallons excess capacity. So when Paul's saying we could accommodate it, let's assume that there's basically no excess capacity in the system.
And you need to add.
And you need to
1,000
add the full 1,200
Right,
gallons.
that's what I'm
Could
saying,
it,
basically.
could it support that?
Yeah.
Yes, if you look at the sketch of the system, I show 2 lines.
I don't have.
I don't know if we got that.
You didn't get that?
No.
Yeah, you
Is
did.
it this one?
Yeah.
Oh, did
Yeah,
it?
yeah, that one. See, I show a proposed line, top and bottom.
Where is that, Daryl?
Oh,
That's
it's the
this-
one that looks
this
like
right
that.
here.
I know,
It's
but-
third page showing this.
Oh, okay, got it. I got it.
So, I don't remember the calculation, each line has a capacity. I think I recall that these were, I mean, I can look it up for you, but I think the total here was 1,900 gallons currently in 6 lines. So,
Are they equal?
oh yeah, and they have to be equal. So that's why I show here 2 lines, when under my calculations, only one was required.
So about 317, 18 gallons per line.
Right.
But I guess the broader question is, it sounds like you feel fairly confident that were the board supportive of whatever the volume count was arrived at, whether that was a 3,000 gallons, maybe a different scenario, but if it's 1,000 gallons versus 700 gallons versus 500 gallons, there should be capacity in the soil types that have been tested with the test wells that have been dug, that you would feel confident that a compliant system could be built without variances. It's just a question of, can we alter this existing system? And by doing so, would it allow the intended use of this space? Okay.
And just going back, so, Mark?
Yes, if
you can,
I'll try to help with the first question. So if there's a change in the food facility, they're required to submit those changes to the Board of Health for review and approval. So that's one area that could be captured.
When they need to get like a
Food
food
permit.
prep
Okay.
establishment sanitation permit?
So it'd be part of their food permit. Any change to your food facility requires application to the Board of Health for that change.
And do you need any permit if you're just going to have food
They
brought
will-
in by a
They
caterer?
will need to, well, it depends.
Well,
They're
the
going to be
church has a-
refrigerating, so
The
they're...
churches have
Yeah.
a permit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would be the
And-
difference? I'm just wondering, like, so where's
It'd
the
be like
line
a
in that?
hall.
Yeah.
It'd be a permit for a hall, like a VFW.
Can I ask about a situation? Where they caterers bring food out, if there's a food permit there or not?
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, so if you're already serving food from a caterer with minimal preparation happening on site, and you need some kind of food establishment permit to just even have, the caterer provide food in that establishment, right? Do you need a different one if you're going to then actually prepare the food?
Well, I
You
think you
would
need to
need-
renew a permit each year.
Yeah, and the permits could be defined, we define permits sometime as incidental, retail, service, so it depends on the type of use. This would be a setup kitchen, which would still require inspection, as well as personnel may be different. If they don't bring in personnel themselves to make meals, then their personnel would not be required to be certified. The caterer would, and the caterer would be required to notify the Board of Health of every event, and it's up to the board if you wish to charge for each catered event. Some towns do, some towns don't. Some towns, when they don't charge, check all the credentials of the personnel coming in for that event. So there's various ways to address each food event.
It sounds
being
like there's a
held.
good mechanism for ongoing oversight, so if the use case were changed,
Right,
either
then the
an evolution of your
inspection.
business plans or future owners.
And now-
And could we tailor the permit to reflect, what you're proposing, which is
Yeah.
food preparation won't be happening on site. They'll just be,
Yeah,
like you
could
said,
be
for
just a setup-
serving and.
Setup kitchen required to have facilities inspected on a
Refrigeration.
regular basis, and also temperatures and all that.
Right.
Although there was some
sanitary
mention of washing
facilities.
plans, so, there's some other details to
Washing,
go through
yeah.
on that. Have permits been issued, Ellen, for the events that have been going on at the farm over the past few years? Which I
This
assume are
farm?
catered, yeah.
No.
Okay, so that would be one thing to get back on top of, because in 2013, it said the board agreed that, that you would need to consult with the Board of Health prior to each proposed event to see if it could be allowed, and if so, the board would review the needs and set the requirements for the specific event. And so, I don't think that's been happening.
Well, this has been kind of
over the last
donated
number of
on
years.
For organisations to use that we've not been involved in some of those events, that people have put events on.
Uh-huh,
Kind of,
and they,
well, there could be charitable organisations in towns that are not been charging for those events.
But I think that would be concerning to the board to sort of say, the fact that you're not making money on it isn't what the health risk is, it's sort of what's the oversight for an event of that
Right.
space.
so need to tighten up on that going forward, pending what we decide tonight, but just want to make that clear, so.
Such as the cooking classes. I mean, how do they do that?
If they don't eat the food, then they don't need a food permit. If they eat the food, it's open to the public, they need to get a food permit.
So it sounds like there may be some gaps here to kind of fill in moving
Yeah.
forward.
Well, cooking classes sounds
And that
like
may
food
affect the
preparation.
calculations for how many lines you want to be
But that's-
putting in,
yeah,
and are there any
Well, and then if we
comments
can
you
get
have
to the
about?
septic system, Paul gives us a review of this Title V section. I think it's in the code that you were discussing, 15203, tells you all the design flows. Function hall is there at 15 gallons per day, as Paul mentioned. We shouldn't be varying from that unless we consult with DEP. DEP is the agency still in the code under 203-6 that reviews any waivers from that chart of flows. In Paul's review, he has at maximums on some of the pages anywhere from 4.5 to 15.5 gallons per day. I know you mentioned there could be variations based on various functions, but that 15.5 max is kind of where the state's going with the 15 gallons per day. Do understand, too, that the state is looking at the most conservative figure.
That's what I was wondering, and
Right.
also, in the past, hasn't it been something where you need multiple other establishments
Yeah,
to?
well, that's why we would have to, wherever this goes, I'd suggest consulting with DEP.
Okay,
Our Northeast region, Claire Golden, still there, she could help us through it. If you look at waiving anything from the actual chart, then you need to take that number and multiply it by 2. You're required to go 200% above the average number. So that's another consideration, that might jump you to 10 versus the requested 5. The other concern I would have, and I'm going to need to call the state, they do allow for you to add on to a septic system, but will they allow it for multiple uses? One question I have, which is various uses, not just residential and commercial. And 2, this system's 20 years old. It was actually approved under a permit 9861, and the final approval was September 22nd of 1999. So it's in the 20-year range. The concern that I would bring to the state, if the board so wishes, is the fact that these units, they're plastic chamber units, have been in use for 20 years. And will adding 2 additional lines of these units cause for uneven flow? You have to have equal flow in a septic system. So if the older units are slowly letting the effluent through, and the newer units let it through too fast or faster than the existing units, how do you compensate? The state does allow for the use of a septic system to be added on, but the question is, will they allow it for mixed use? And how do you evaluate? Now that it's been 20 years, the state originally said your system has to be at least a 1995 or newer system, and you can add on for additional bedrooms and use. But where do you go when you're 20 years old with the equal flow issue? So if that effluent's coming into that distribution box and it's going to favor the 2 new units, one on the upper side and one on the lower side as proposed, it will come out evenly, but will it flow quicker, and will it take more effluent? So, has to be at least discussed and reviewed. Maybe the system needs to be reviewed to see if they're caking up below these units. That's all for discussion and review, but a concern I would have, because then the system's not functioning properly.
Is having a second system an option?
That's what I was gonna
It
ask, just
could
like,
be,
just
yeah. I would suggest,
have a whole separate
if this
system.
becomes the issue, that would be another opportunity, but obviously,
cleaner.
it becomes a challenge, I think, for getting, again, they have to get it all the way over to the other area, because I think the land on this side is too wet. That's the challenge back in
So you couldn't put it
1998.
closer to the barn?
If Sherburne didn't have the groundwater restriction, we could, but
So that's the only lot where the groundwater
That's the only
depth
place-
is 5 feet?
Yeah, that's why it's way over there. I think, prior to you, Paul, I think it was Beals and Thomas did some evaluation. I don't know if they tested the property, but in the springtime, if you go by these properties on
For what?
Weston Ave, you'll see
Oh, yeah.
water.
So is there any
Put
way
in
to
line.
share the lines that are existing to some degree?
be interesting to
And then
see-
split to two different fields, or there's
That,
no way to
you,
manage?
That's what I was,
But then
You'd
how
have
do you
to-
keep the flow even to those
Yeah.
two different
I
fields?
don't-
distribution box is supposed to
Yeah,
do
you'd
that.
need
but
some
you know,
controls. You couldn't do it by gravity. You'd
you
have
can
to do it some
you can
other
do
way.
two distribution boxes.
Can I,
You could
going,
Go to one and then split it.
possible, yeah.
going back to the question of the function hall, it looks like in the Title V pieces, like it becomes a question, facilities other than those listed, which includes the function hall settings, in non-residential facilities with unique design features that result in significantly different design flows than those listed above, may apply to the department for determination of design flow using actual meter readings of established flows from existing or similar installations without the need for a variance. And so it seems like we'd be making the assertion that while this is like a function hall, it's different in that there's no food prep, and that, thus we believe that.
Well,
But,
it's very similar to the one in Holliston.
but I think
that's-
separate from that, like
Right.
Holliston could be completely non-compliant, and so if I said I copied the totally non-compliant guy without doing my own due, I'm not,
Compliant in what way?
and, I mean, it's not a Title V system, is it? It's on a sewer?
No, it's on septic.
It's on septic?
It's on septic.
Could
It's on
you-
a septic that's probably 50.
could you
years old.
find at
But-
least
well, no,
two
no,
other
but-
places though
but I
that
think-
are?
but
We
even-
tried it, but I haven't been able to.
But even to that, though, it says that you have to have, so the basis then, so if we're making the assertion, this is similar to Holliston, and we want to use the observed flow rates from that, what it establishes then is that the, for state and federal facility, let's see, any design flow established by the department pursuant to this shall be based on 200% of average water metering readings in order to assimilate maximum daily flows on other methods determined.
Mark mentioned that. earlier.
Right.
So that would be a 10-gallon based on.
I mean,
average of 5.
or it'd be 11 point, I mean, like if we're saying
Right,
5.7, it'd be
5.7.
11. And so again, I think the question of how scalable this is, so I think for us, it gets tricky. I do think that Mark's point of it would need to probably go
Forward
to
to the
DEP
state.
for guidance. But then I think just as we think about this and pursuing that, it, at least looking at that regulation as a non-lawyer looking at it, it seems like we're probably looking at an 11 to 12 gallon system.
Which is pretty close to the 15.
Which again, I would say, and again, for me, like, I think your rationale for why to use Holliston seems reasonable in terms of, here's the observed flows, but even if we apply that then to their metric, it seems like we're probably 11 to 12. And so I think the question we should take to the state would be for a system that looked like that. It's,
So would the board be willing to agree to just use it if we were to use 15?
I mean, I think from my standpoint, the thing that I'm invested in is trying to make sure what we're doing is sort of safe, reasonable, and scalable. So if we feel like, based on the best available data, we have a conservative estimate that provides adequate treatment, you know, based on 15 gallons per day or whatever, for me, that would be satisfactory, because that's the best guidance we have. I think the questions are, if there are big seasonal variations, I don't have a good sense of, but like, this is a piece we've talked about with the Cape houses of, if you say I've got my summer season and we're using the barn 90% of the time in the summer, and then our usage drops by 80% 6 or 8 months a year, it gets trickier for me to think about how that system performs over time, but I'm not sure that I've got a
Because if
separate.
it's oversized, that's usually not a good thing necessarily for systems. So
Yeah, but the challenge, I think, still will be too, is how we get effluent just for the function hall to a separate system. Not our challenge,
Right.
be the engineer's challenge.
But I think, like, broadly, I wouldn't conceptually
Because you might
say,
need a separate pump and all that too.
Yep.
Can't combine it.
What about Stowe?
like Stowe Acres Country Clubs, doesn't Stowe have,
I was at Stowe Acres just 2 weeks ago.
don't they have, septic?
Well,
Stowe?
they're a country club slash function hall.
Right,
Yeah,
no, I've
yeah,
been to
my
weddings.
point's gonna be though, the only thing DEP has is a function hall.
Right.
And knowing DEP, that's gotta include a facility that
Right.
prepares the food on site.
Right, I think it would take some of the agita about how do we finesse this out of it if you use a DEP conservative default
Right, so
assumption.
15, it sounds like our anxiety.
Cover everything.
Right.
Right.
But I wouldn't say that, like, categorically, I'm forever uncomfortable with the prospect. Like,
going
if it's
lower.
compliant for if we're building the same system brand new today, and we're not asking for variances such that this is opening a larger conversation about variances for new construction, like, to me, if it's a compliant system, it's a compliant system. I may have my 2 cents about other pieces of things I'd love to see or I might suggest, but I don't know that I've got a position to say.
So.
So it sounds to me that Mark needs to, though, check on a
Okay.
couple of things. One is the change of use and what that means for DEP. The other is, I mean, and that's going to feed into the issue of, and the function hall variations, right? So function hall with food prep, is that what they intended? Yay, nay? If it's what they intended, and this is different, then it opens the door to get 2, and what do you do if the person can't find a second that's comparable? I mean, so there are a few, I think there's a way to work it out, and we're halfway there with the numbers. If you found something comparable that was similar, and
Finding something, even
DEP
if
said
it's on a
yes, it's,
sewer, is fine. It's the
yeah,
flow.
Right,
it's
it's the
just the
flow,
flow.
right.
Typically, these facilities don't have their own separate meter.
Oh, there's a barn in, for functions in Lincoln. I forget what it's called,
Okay,
but that,
I'll ask the Board of Health.
I don't know if it has food prep, but I'm kind of guessing not.
Okay,
but-
but still.
But again, I think if you kind of, like, I think all of us would say function hall at the 15 gallon per day, the assertion that it includes food prep seems broadly reasonable. So I think,
Well, you'll confirm that.
But Mark can find out.
okay.
So conversely, would that mean if you decided to have preparation on site, you wouldn't? be
I mean, I think if we felt like it's a, like, I think if it's a DEP estimate and says 15 gallon per day includes food prep, then it includes food prep. I might
Yeah.
wave a magic wand and say, I'd love for you to not do that, but that's not what the regulation
Well, and
gives
that,
me.
that brings up zoning. I was gonna say, that's step 1, getting through zoning. I don't know, have you
Didn't you
gotten?
already do that?
We did.
Yeah,
So
so-
the
So you're-
zoning regs have changed last time meeting to allow it.
Did they make a determination? If you had to have a caterer versus on-site cooking?
Because it's part of farm usage, and that really wasn't even an aspect they discussed.
Okay, because I would say it's not really, if zoning says you can cook on-site, we're back to the 15.
Right.
No.
And- but
As
I
long
think
as they
for
have a
us,
certified
if
kitchen.
15 is with cooking,
Right,
then I
you
think
just
our
need to
restrictions on the
confirm that.
use now or in the future are kind of
Right.
addressed.
Right.
I think you would rather not do cooking anyway, that's, works better with caterers.
And then the other question is water supply. Public, private, it's private right now, hasn't been tested for public water.
Right.
You have a
and you need to
200-plus
look at,
function hall.
do you have over 25 people a day for 60 days a year?
I think
Isn't
that's
that- I
right.
think that's roughly it.
That's the cutoff.
So,
And if it's not, then it comes under our jurisdiction for a food facility where they need to test it and make sure it meets code. Is it multi-use? Are there backflows if it's being used by more than the food facility? Do you plan on using the water supply that's used on site right now for the house?
So there's a separate well for the barn.
I thought there was. Is that the water supply you're planning to use? Has that been tested? I can't
It was
remember.
tested when it was put in 9 years ago. 10 years.
Yeah, I remember it going, thought there was. I don't, starting to remember it now. It's been a long history.
And so it sounds like the questions you have before the board today is kind of a general exploration of, would there be receptiveness to this? It sounds like they're clarifying questions, but also that this is probably not the only step in the process that would be before the board, that the water issues would be one, and the kind of technical issues.
And it
really-
could be a limit where if it goes over, it becomes public water, if you have that
Right,
number of
so if you
25
had-
over 60.
60 uses would be more than 1 day a week.
Right.
Well, it's 52 weeks.
So if you
But,
used
I
it-
mean, you could, if you wanted to rent it out both days on a weekend, some of the
or
weekends.
a morning
or-
and an evening,
Yeah.
or, you know, you need to think
It could
about
trigger-
what that might be.
Does the morning and the evening trigger it, or does a day count as a day?
True.
I think a day's a
True,
day.
a
think a
day
day's a
is a
day.
day, yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Anything else to think about, so got permits, water?
Have you had a Title V inspection of the septic system recently at all? Would they open up the distribution box to see how it's working?
No.
That sounds like it would probably be a good idea. Do you think?
Well, I'm sure it would be a requirement before we get letters.
Right.
I know, but why go all this route if you find that the system's good or bad?
Yes.
you
And
know?
also, Mark, you're also going to be checking on whether the DEP has reconsidered that, as long as it's Title V compliant system, but, for how long is that going to be okay for add-ons? Or
I know it, because now
do
we're
they have any
reaching that.
guidance on
yeah.
that? So that's the other piece where maybe a new
For
system
equal flow.
would be easier than,
And so
And
for-
you're looking at equal flow, that's how you want a septic system to work. But again, in 95, they did allow for additions to septic systems built after 1995, but as you just said, they're getting older now, they're 25 years old almost, so.
So for next steps for kind of the Mark piece, what does that look like? Is that Mark and Paul talking after Mark follows up with?
Yeah, and I can
DEP?
reach DEP on behalf of the Board of Health to ask them
Okay.
questions too.
and then you two will
And,
talk and then kind of plan the next step,
Yeah,
and
that's fine.
Paul will inform you of whatever they're finding out.
And do we have any room count piece? So as we consider this, it sounds like right now we're doing broad kind of categorical pieces, but I would also say, right now, it sounds like there's some outstanding questions going back over the historical minutes about what exactly the room count
Capacity.
is, as we come up with, this is the gallons per day, this is the actual concrete addition steps. It seems like we'd want to make sure that we're totally
I think the
consistent.
past room count is fixed, is it
Yeah,
not?
well, as of 2014, the board more or less said the capacity is up to, but there was an addition, it says, which leaves only 60 gallons over the septic capacity. That was March 5th of 2014.
Would
the
you like
discussion
my,
occurred.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Copies of
I could
minutes?
give you mine.
I can-
this is all the minutes.
Oh, you'll have, going back to the 90s.
There you go. Sure.
Okay, thank you all.
Have a good night, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okey-dokey. So Mark, would you like to do
3 Oldfield?
Oldfield?
Sure.
It's like, get those feet working, you gotta be nice to come up to the front.
Oh, yeah, I was going to institute
A standing desk.
seventh inning stretch or something for the board.
I'm on board.
Okay, everybody's standing.
3 Oldfield.
For health.
Hoping to put in actually a smaller house than what's there. The board approved the fact that they did need to upgrade their septic system that was built around that 94, 95 era. But they did need to update the plan as it relates to the septic system, tanks to get the new house in. So let me show the project plan. They had to update this for dual alternating pumps. They only showed single pumps, so that's the new part of the plan, which they did indicate dual alternating. They're using the state code instead. So that's the basic sections of the tank. 2 compartment, just backwards, supposed to be, it's not backwards, it's just showing with the inlet coming this way versus that way. I don't know why. Maybe the boilerplate didn't fit the right way. But this is the plan of the property itself, and this is Oldfield, here's the corner to Harrington, their septic, they did some testing here. They would have, this system is still functioning, so they're gonna be using this leaching area here. And then they're gonna draw, here's the new house being built, the driveway right, you can see the shadow of a house here.
Oh, that was the old foundation.
You can't really see anything, can you? So,
I can't really hear, so.
they're putting, and they put in a new barn, and so what they're going to be doing now is building us, as you can see from the old house, a smaller
footprint.
home. She wants a smaller home, she's been here to talk to the board, the garage.
Yep.
Pretty much where the house is, the old house. And then they're gonna put in the septic 1,500 gallon 2 compartment tank to the pump chamber. And those are more than 50 feet from the septic system, they're 154. And then swing the line over to the distribution box.
And they're sort of doing that to skirt around the barn, or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. The new barn you built. They will be required to put a clean out because it's more than 150, but they'll need one clean out between. It's a force main, so it's difficult not to put in something that's very tight, so it doesn't blow out the pipes.
All right, so do you see any
No, based on.
sticky issues here?
No,
or-
groundwater, if they were putting these tanks over here, they would need those special couplings, but they're higher off the ground at the elevations are at here,
Oh, okay.
and not anywhere where the groundwater was over here. So, and it don't have a mound, this is a big mound right here. You can see from the street. I don't see any issues, recommend approval.
Okay. So do we have a motion to approve the plans as presented, subject to anything?
If they need a clean out, I'll double check the measurement, but if it's over 150, they'll need a clean out. If not, they can clean it out from both ends and get to the center. That's that discussion we had on another property recently.
Okay. Motion, anybody?
304.
To approve plans, 3 Oldfield?
So moved.
Septic tank and pump chamber.
Second. Any
Second.
other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Are there any abstentions?
Do you want me to do 21 at all while I'm standing?
Yeah.
Sure. And then we'll just beat a warrants and payroll.
I ran into this actually a while back. The board changed the code to state that a well cannot be within 20 feet of a driveway for protection of the well. We did, Dan McIntyre ran into it. He was the first engineer to run into this, where they did a property down at the beginning of Western Ave, and then the well got too close to the driveway and all the changes. So Ben has been modifying this plan from day one, and he has pictures to show you. And I can
Yeah.
verify those pictures, I've been on the site, that he put these large rocks, nothing's gonna get to this well.
Yeah.
Like chunks of
I saw the
ledge.
boulders.
This ledge right here.
Yeah,
Well,
those
as
are
soon
the
as something
boulders,
bumps
the
into
boulders.
that and nudges the well, then
Yeah.
it's all over, but,
But I think you would ruin your plow truck if you did.
Yeah.
So, and I took some pictures too of it, so I don't see an issue with it. Recommend that it be waived as requested on.
And so-
the letter.
And I just want to make sure I'm I'm trying to remember, is this the property that we described?
You should have.
Because I think we've had these ones that were like the Green Lane ones that were like unusually shaped lots. This is not a secondary consequence of that. Is that correct?
of having
This
pieces
is,
cut off
lot
to make another.
Closest to lots, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 4B, I believe, and 5.
And so this is not the sort of bizarrely shaped lot that
No,
was
this
created?
was, what happened here, this was here's the well. What happened here, he relocated the house, this was the one that had the water issue that we were dealing
Oh,
with.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So with the
Is this the one that he
basement-
kind of built into the
Yeah,
slope
he-
and then, yeah?
He originally was putting it here, up on the top of the hill, and he moved it down a little bit. Originally, they were, or vice versa, I apologize, it was here, he was putting it here. Here's the. here's
Closer to the
original-
street.
The original
Yeah.
depots for where the house was going, and the customer wanted it higher up on the hill. That's how it ended up there.
Have we granted this kind of variance for new construction before? Because there's this giant property, and yet we're down to, I'm
But
just
it's-
curious.
It is a variance, but
But
it
it's-
isn't.
yeah, 'cause
Because
you
the
can-
regulations allow you to do,
Yeah,
allow
to
this.
protect it, so.
Yeah.
Right.
But originally,
Okay.
this driveway was cut
Yeah,
in
it's
like this.
Yeah, so
kind
it's
of
not-
a funny.
So he
Okay.
changed the house location, which caused
The
the
driveway.
driveway to be changed more towards almost the other.
But I think your point that this is not a variance for new
It's-
construction, it's
yeah.
sort of within the purview of the board to
It's-
consider protective
Right.
factors.
Process.
Right, because it's allowed in that, the one of that
If
regulation.
you use the boulders or the
Yeah.
bolt.
Yeah.
Something to protect the
I was just
well
curious if
from
there are any
damage.
pitfalls that were gonna be,
There was-
you know, getting
I
more
mean,
and
my
more
piece is like,
Yet you- and
risky
because
well
you allow
locations
it.
because people aren't
Yeah.
paying.
Well, or the
Tension.
sequential piece of, I asked you for, if you give a mouse a cookie, it's the book that comes to my mind about like, okay, we did this, well, okay, we've now made this constrained lot, okay, now within that constrained lot, I have to do this.
Yeah.
I need a variance for that.
You'll see
Now, in
others.
10 years, I'll need the septic system, can't go
Yeah.
anywhere but here,
Which is
and, but it seems like this one is separate from that, because this is, the goal here is really to protect the
Yeah.
well, there's a mechanism to
Yeah.
protect the well. The mouse
Yeah.
may have a cookie, but that is what it is.
And it's their on-site well for that
Right.
property, so.
Right.
So based on the protection provided now with the well closer to the driveway, that's what we do. Had the well in way before the
Right.
change to the house. That's what happened here, that's the
Yeah.
consequence of it.
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve this,
Yeah,
Well,
I'm
it's not a
calling
waiver,
it-
you
I'm
said, right?
calling
Provision.
it a variance, but
Process.
yeah,
because
But it's actually a variance,
I
it's
don't know
actually
what-
within the regulation.
it's a variance,
It says you
but
can
it's,
involve
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So they're meeting the conditions of the
Of-
change in distance, so do we have to,
There's
You're-
a-
Yeah,
do
you
we
have to-
acknowledge that they provided
Yeah.
the
Yeah, that they provided-
safety protections that are warranted?
We're not granting a waiver to protect
Okay.
the
Yeah.
regulations.
Okay, so that, we acknowledge
I don't want to set a
We're
precedent.
acknowledging-
We
the
concur that it's
conditions,
compliant.
yeah.
okay.
That's a good way to prove,
Okay.
it's an acknowledgement.
Affirmed, how about that, affirmed?
Affirmed.
So are we voting on this affirmation?
Yeah, you have to
I'm getting
vote
there.
to allow
Okay.
the protection.
Okay.
Yeah, vote on.
Yeah.
Well, they're already
Are we
there,
gonna be
aren't they?
signing
So- This is
Yeah.
a post facto
Well, I
affirmation.
mean, why are we
or-
voting on it if it's already done and we don't really get to change it?
Because he's asked for it.
Okay.
The
Ben,
developer.
Okay, but he did it without our
So
permission.
do we have a
Well, you're
motion
vo-
to
he's asking
acknowledge
for it now, so.
No, but I'm not
the
gonna,
change to the
I
well?
mean, because effectively then we can get sued
Protection
for change
added
setting
to
a
the well.
precedent and then violate.
So moved.
later.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're approving he worded it properly, he said, the regulation as stated is for a 20-foot separation with the ability to reduce that with the board's approval.
Right.
So that's theoretically, that's what
Yeah.
you're,
Right.
not theoretically.
It's
what you're doing.
right.
So we're essentially affirming that the regulation is applicable here.
Yes.
We're affirming that no variance to the regulation is required, and we're affirming that,
Yeah.
as currently laid out, it's compliant. Were that to change, and were the owner to say, I don't want boulders there, I want to stare at my wellhead, that would not be compliant. So I think capturing that the boulders need to remain for protection, for this to remain in compliance with the regulation from our standpoint. Because like, what if they said like, oh, I want to move the boulders? Would we still say we're okay with 8 feet from the driveway because it's your well and your problem, or would we say?
No.
No, because it has to have the safety
Right.
protection,
And
so we approve with conditioned upon the maintenance of the safety protections currently in place.
Okay. So that's the motion now. Do you want to move that one?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
And,
Why don't you just,
and
you don't want to be
abstention.
opposed? You'd rather abstain?
Or opposed?
You can be opposed.
I'm gonna have to come
I don't-
down.
I just don't
Okay.
want to participate
Okay.
Okay.
because
Abstain.
it's all,
You're not gonna be able to read this, so.
And does that do that for our televised business? Do we need to
No,
discuss
we
it?
have flu clinic.
Flu clinic.
Yeah, I spoke with St. Teresa's, and the flu clinic will be Tuesday, October 30th, 6 to 8
Cabbage night.
at night, yeah. Yeah. I was hoping for the 23rd, but can't have the room. So,
Okay.
I'm putting that in my
Sounds good.
calendar.
And when does sign-up start? Has that already started? or
No,
Because
no.
you just got the date.
I just got the
Okay.
date, and I'm recruiting my volunteers.
I
Okay.
feel like I'd be good at giving injections.
I feel
would
like
you
you're
mind
the-
saying that again?
Would I-
Did you
October
ask?
30th.
Because I was thinking about what we were
October
discussing.
30th is the flu clinic at St.
Tuesday.
Teresa's.
Oh, yeah, I definitely want to participate. What day of the week is that?
Tuesday.
Yeah, I'm going
Oh,
to send
good,
it
this
right
year
now.
it's a better time.
Sorry. Figured there was.
Sure.
It was last year, too.
I know, but I had something, just by coincidence,
just
I
do the
used to have a
stamp.
clinic on Tuesdays, but I don't anymore. Schedule changed.
Okay. And so Rick, if you'd like to terminate the televised portion, that's fine. We're just doing signing of plans, approval of the warrants and payroll, and approval of minutes. So. Signing.
Ready?